This is going to be my first podcast. I'm still trying to decide on what the name of it's going to be, and I'll end up, by the time I post it, I'll have a name, and then I'll know what to call it on future podcasts. I just want to mention a few things before I start. This is my first podcast ever. This is also my first time really starting to push my socials and everything, so this podcast, the beginning of it is going to be centered around introducing myself, introducing what hobbies I have and what things I'm into, as well as what type of topics I'm going to have conversations about both on the podcast and in videos. So first I'll introduce myself in general. My name is Logan Pendragon. That is my writing slash author pen name. That's what I go by both in my writing and my authoring, which is all the stuff that I published, as well as all of my socials. And that's what I push myself as, Logan Pendragon. I have a few hobbies. But before I get into that, let me introduce first myself as a writer. I am a writer slash author. I write in a variety of genres, both fiction and nonfiction. I write fiction, science fiction, and fantasy, as well as some horror and other genres as well. Sometimes poetry also. I write novels, short stories. I'm working on a serial novel. I have quite a bit published on Amazon. You can find my website, loganpendragon.com, which will also go into details about my writing. You can find on Amazon as well as on my website, which isn't fully updated, but it is on Amazon. I'm really big into writing. I've been writing for many, many years. I have a lot of experience at writing. I am a published author, and I have made a decent bit off my writing, but obviously I'd like to make more and like to grow as a writer, but that's not the reason I do it. I do it because it's a huge passion for me, and it's something that I enjoy doing. So I write mostly for the passion behind it, and that's kind of my main thing. I like writing in general, topics related to writing that also branches off into reading. I like reading novels and short stories. I like reading books and things like that. In my nonfiction, I have a few things that I've worked on. I've worked on an apocrypha book, which is like a compilation of all the apocrypha books put together into a 6-part series. Originally, I did it as a 1-part series, but it ended up not working out because it was 1.1 million words, which I couldn't do hardback on, so I redid it as 6 different parts and refined it a lot. And then I have 2 book series that are sisters. One's called WTF, Wisdom That Fits, which is generic wisdom, both beginner wisdom and deep dive. So there's 2 different types of books in that series. And the other one is personal wisdom, which is more wisdom that I pull from myself. So Wisdom That Fits is more like generic knowledge, even stuff that I don't fully know about that I take the time to research and write the book about. And then personal wisdom, which is written from my own personal experience. So yes, I'm a writer and an author. I love writing. I love the writing industry, working with other writers, giving feedback in the writing industry, and so forth. So that's one thing. Aside from that, I'm also a gamer. I've been playing games my entire life for many, many, many years. I've played on all the platforms: PC, Xbox, PlayStation, all the way from the first systems that came out all the way up to the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox One X and the One S. PC for a long time. I played all the handheld systems: Switch, Game Boy, GameCube, all the way, or Game Boy, all the way back to the early handheld systems, all the way to the newer ones like the Switch and the PSP and the Vita. I have a vast amount of experience at gaming across many different genres: shooting games, strategy games, simulation, RPGs, everything. I've played everything. Platformers, scrollers. I've beaten more games than I can count, but over the last few years I've started putting a really big focus on beating series, which has been really fun for me. So beating series like, let me give you some examples. What I mean by beating a series is, I mean starting on a series and playing it from the first to the most recent game, and then once I do that, I can keep up with new games as they come out. And that's kind of what I've been doing over the last few years, which I find really entertaining, going back and finally putting some focus on the series. So some of the ones I've beaten: Mass Effect, Halo, Yakuza. I've beaten all the Yakuza games up until the most recent one, Infinite Wealth, which I haven't gotten yet, which I'm going to be getting soon. Assassin's Creed, I'm currently on Mirage, actually trying to get done with it before Shadows comes out, so I can start on Shadows when it comes out. All the Halo games, Gears of War. Let's see what else. There's a lot. There's a lot of different series that I'll be in. Those are just a few. But as a gamer, I know a lot about the gaming industry, gaming news, new news that's coming out for like the systems, the companies that make the games themselves, the game series. So like there'll be a lot of stuff in the future about video games and the video game industry in general. Moving on to my next hobby, I'm a huge comic enthusiast. I read a lot of comics. I know a lot about comic history. I read Dark Horse, Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, Image, and Independent. So I'm pretty much reading everything. I've read comics my whole life. So when it comes to most comics, comic book characters, comic book companies, brands, I know pretty much everything there is to know about comics. And what I don't know, I absorb pretty quickly. I got a very deep understanding of a lot of the comic heroes, the characters behind it, comic trivia. I'm just really big on comics, so I will be doing a lot of content and stuff about comics. Currently, I'm in the process of reading through the chronological X-Men from start to finish. I'm around the Secret Wars 2 era, which I'm working through now a little bit at a time as I do everything else, but I'm really big on comics, and I have a lot of feedback in the comic industry as well. Beyond that, I do consider myself to be somewhat of a self-taught scholar that basically knows he knows nothing, which is the beginning of wisdom to an extent. I said that wrong, but you get my point. I like thinking that I know a variety of different subjects, which I really have interest in. So it leads me down to, like, I've got a very deep understanding of human psychology, the human mind, both psychology and dark psychology, parapsychology. I know a great deal about dreams, dream reading and interpretation, lucid dreaming, and things like that. I know a lot about psychological things, a very deep understanding of dark psychology, and I use it to help teach people that I'm close to how to protect themselves from it. Three of my core skills that I've naturally had my whole life, aside from dream reading, is reading people, reading social constructs, and reading patterns. And all of those different things I'll get into eventually, but right now this is just meant to serve as an overview. But I'm very good at reading dreams and everything related to dreams. Moving on to the next subject, I'm very good at technology. I have a very deep understanding of technology and how technology and AI come together. I'm really big on AI, technology, and programming, various things like that. So there will be a lot of stuff like that I'll talk about. So that's kind of an introduction to me and who I am and the kind of stuff that I like talking about. Now, in this specific podcast, I want to cover a variety of subjects. I think that the way that I want to do this in the future is each podcast is going to be probably between a half hour to 2 hours, depending on how much I have to talk about. And in the description, when I post the podcast, I will provide a checklist of what topics were discussed. I probably won't do timestamps or anything because I'm not too big on video editing and all that stuff. I just want to be myself, film and post, and not worry about all the specifics. And eventually I might get better at that stuff. But for now, I'm just going to give a checklist of the topics that we talk about. So with that being said, I do have a few things that I want to talk about in this video or in this podcast. So it'll be a great starting point. And then in future podcasts, it'll just be whatever random topics I decide to talk about when I do the podcast, and it could be a wide spectrum. Some of the podcasts might specifically be about one specific thing, like just comics or just video games, but for the most part it's going to be a mixed match of the various different things that I'm into and some stuff that I may not have even mentioned. I just want to kind of go with the flow and have conversations and just see where things go. Alright, so the first topic that I want to talk about in relation to comics is I want to cover definitions of a couple of very specific terms, and then after that I want to get into a conversation about how continuity and time dilation works in the different comic universes. So first I want to tell you continuity. What is continuity? So continuity is consistency of events, characters, or timelines and settings within a comic universe or storyline. Basically, that's the running storyline of a comic. A retcon. To explain what a retcon is, it is a revision of an established event or character history, often altering previous accepted narratives. So something happens in the comic universe at one point, and then at a future point, they rewrite the past of what happened by updating the timeline, so to speak. And they do this to resolve inconsistencies, refresh storylines, accommodate new creative direction because writers change hands and stuff like that. So, keeping that in mind, time dilation is the third thing you're going to need to understand before we get into what I'm going to talk about. Time dilation is basically the difference in how time progresses within a story compared to the real world passage of time. So, like characters aging slowly or not at all, despite there's decades of publication. So, with that being said, I want to talk about Marvel, DC, Image, and Dark Horse, and I want to talk about how continuity is handled in each one of these different major publishers. So first, let's start with Marvel Comics. Marvel Comics runs off of a continuity approach. They have a unified, expansive universe that they call Marvel 616 or Earth 616, which is their main continuity, their main universe, their main timeline. It's heavily connected stories with a strong emphasis on historical canon. So almost every comic within the Marvel universe falls within Marvel 616. Now that's not always the case. There are other alternate universes, there are other alternate realities that are called Earth whatever. So you have like the Marvel universe, you have... So aside from Earth 616, which is the main running continuity, they have a lot of others. So they have Earth 1610, which is the ultimate Marvel universe. And then they have one called Earth 199999, which is the MCU, which is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is technically not comics, but it's still a separate universe split off from the same multiverse. And then you've got like Earth 295, which is Age of Apocalypse, Earth 982, which is the MC2 universe, Earth 928, which is Marvel 2099. So they've got a bunch of different, quote, Earths, each one signifying their own self-contained universe. And then they have what Marvel Comics calls Earth 1218, which is our real world where the Marvel Comics exists as fictional stories. So it's kind of deep, but you get the point. Going back to the root, Earth 616 is the ongoing main continuity for Marvel Comics. Now, within the continuity of Marvel Comics, they tend to use... Now that we know the main continuity of Marvel Comics, Marvel tends to use both retcons and time dilation quite a bit. So for the retcons, when they go back and retcon something that's happened in the past, they do it to resolve inconsistencies or contradictions from past storylines. They sometimes do it to modernize older characters and narratives. And because it changes writers so often, sometimes it's just simply to keep those writers in mind. Let me give you an example. Spider-Man. If you looked at the One More Day storyline, it basically erases... Back in the old comics, Peter Parker married Mary Jane Watson. But if you look at the One More Day storyline, it erased their original marriage from continuity completely in order to reset Spider-Man's characters and relationships. Another example, Captain America. Revealing that Steve Rogers was trapped in ice after World War II basically retroactively established he was missing in action for decades, which again was another retcon they built out. Even stuff like Jean Grey, for example. Originally in the comic, she died and then came back as Phoenix, and then Phoenix died. But later, it retconned it to where Phoenix ended up being a separate cosmic entity that was impersonating Jean, and Jean was in like a little thing in the water that the Fantastic Four ended up discovering and releasing. So they do that a lot. The Beyonder is another good example, which that's a whole nother conversation. But Beyonder, originally he was a cosmic level entity that was more powerful than any other being in the Marvel Universe altogether. And then they retcon him multiple times throughout the history of Marvel Comics. So that's one thing. The other thing they use something called time dilation. The way that it's called time dilation, which is called a sliding scale within Marvel Comics. So basically it handles the passing of time using a method known as sliding time scale. It allows characters to remain relevant and relatively young despite decades of real world publication. So here's how the sliding time scale works. Characters age extremely slow or inconsistently. Historical events shift forward in time. For example, Iron Man originally was tied to the Vietnam War, was then moved forward into more recent conflicts like Afghanistan. Major storylines from the past slide to fit contemporary timelines, preventing characters from aging realistically. So, a good example, Spider-Man was introduced in 1962 as a teenager. In real time, he would be elderly today, but Marvel's sliding timeline keeps him pretty young throughout the whole time, so he's always in his late 20s or early 30s because of it. Even the Fantastic Four, being introduced in the space race in the 1960s, have only aged a little bit in the Marvel comics because they use time dilation to keep them young. Now that's Marvel Comics. They handle a variety of things differently than the other comic series. There are some things I don't like about it, but I'm used to the way that Marvel does it, and it works for them, and it really fits within the realm of the universe. I don't really like full resets because it makes it harder to keep up with. And Marvel has done some like soft resets. Like there have been some things, like there was an event where almost every mutant was wiped out, and then they came back. Like there's a lot of stuff that happened, but I generally prefer the way that they do it. DC, on the other hand, they also use continuity as well. So, however, they have their whole universe in one big area, just like Marvel does, but they tend to use reboots a lot. So they'll end up doing a complete reboot to completely reset the whole universe. So, for example, Crisis Events, Flashpoint, New 52, Rebirth, and then they end up having multiple timelines and alternate universes to allow for greater storytelling. They have some time dilation in DC Comics, but it's a lot less deep than it is with Marvel because they use reboots to completely reset the continuity anyway, which makes everything different. And then Dark Horse and Image are very similar. They typically have, instead of having like a general universal continuity, they typically have, because each different thing released under Dark Horse or Image all have their own creators and their own writers, which means each one of the self-contained stories tend to have their own world. So typically they'll have story-specific continuity due to the self-contained titles or limited series. And then they don't do time dilation as much in there as well because of the same reason. However, in some series, like with Dark Horse with Hellboy, for example, he ages naturally within the series within a predefined timeline. Image Comics is the same way. They're creator-driven continuity because they're creator-driven titles, which means each title tends to have their own continuity, their own timelines, their own world, although they do crossovers and stuff like that as well. So all four of the main companies have different ways of doing things, and it works well within the confines of each company. So typically, if you try to keep up with it, as long as you know what you're getting into, it's good to start. Like for Marvel, for example, you can start reading Marvel from anywhere, but if you have a really hard time reconciling the past, like for me, for example, if I'm going to read about a character, I have to know the whole history. So I tend to go back. Like when I started getting into Venom, for example, I went all the way back to the first appearance of Venom and read all the way up until the most recent and kept up with it from there. That's how I work. So if you're dealing with like DC or Dark Horse or Image, getting into the titles can be a little easier because you'll get into a title and you can continue from one of the continuity jumps. Like in DC, if you wanted to get into Superman, you could look at the different breaks in continuity and pick which one you want to start at and then kind of get a recap of his past, and that's a little bit easier to keep track of. Because if you go back to the earlier comics, whenever they do a reboot, it's like a completely different universe. So that's something else to keep in mind. But overall, it works well, and it's just the way comics are. And it's something that I've always been interested in, which is why I wanted to talk about it here, because I wanted to kind of address how continuity and time dilation work and what retcons are. For any comic fan, most of them already know that, but if you didn't, you do now. So that pretty much covers a lot of the topics pertaining to the continuity and sliding scale timelines. So now I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into some specific comic related topics that have been on my mind for a while. And I've done several separate videos of this, but consider this to be like my official conversation about it, going into more detail and talking about things I wanted to talk about because I didn't get to fully explore that in other videos. So first, let's start with the Beyonder. Who is the Beyonder? The Beyonder he's a cosmic global entity that was introduced in Marvel Comics Secret Wars 1 back in 1984. He was an omnipotent being from the Beyond Realm. He ended up creating Battleworld, abducting several of Earth's heroes and villains, and then they fought inside the that world that he created called Battleworld. Um, After that, Doctor Doom at one point possessed his abilities for a brief moment in time, and then Beyonder took his power back, and then he sent the heroes back to Earth. It was a small pinhole that was created in his universe by someone named Molecule Man that originally caused him to come out of his world. So he lived in a self-contained, separate universe where he was everything. He was the be-all and end-all of knowledge and wisdom. He was the other dimension. So when he opened when that pinhole got created, he started getting curious about Earth 616. So he had pretty much cosmic level skill. He could do pretty much anything. He had what a lot of people consider, or what they called, selective omniscience, where he didn't necessarily know everything right off the bat, but if he thought about anything, he would get wisdom of whatever he thought about instantly. So like two people could be over there talking and him not know anything about it, and he could look at them and think about it. All of a sudden he would know everything there was to know about both people, what they were talking about, all the situations related to it. Or if he wanted to learn some topic, he could think about it, and if he focused on it, he would get infinite wisdom in that topic. Like, he didn't necessarily know everything at one time, but he was selectively able to know everything that he wanted to by choice. So that was interesting. He was one of my favorite characters. I love, like, he's a great character, the way that he put the dynamics together, because he affected a lot of the Marvel Universe. When he came in Secret Wars 2, he ended up getting really involved in the Marvel Universe, and a lot of things happened. He gave a lot of the characters, like, made a lot of them question their existence. Like, for example, he ended up affecting Nightcrawler, for example, so badly that he was questioning his faith for years. So the Beyonder affected a lot of them. So let me give you some examples. Let's start with Nightcrawler. During Secret Wars, he encountered Beyonder several times. A cosmic being so much more powerfully advanced than him, it made him start questioning his faith in God, his nature of the divinity. It challenged a lot of his beliefs. But when they retconned, to me, I'm going to get into that in a minute, but they retconned Beyonder. Let's start with that. Let's start with how they retconned him, and then we'll get back to this in a minute. They retconned him in three main ways. Originally, he was retconned as an incomplete cosmic cube lacking a matrix to contain his energy. So he went from being an all-powerful cosmic entity that was from his own dimension that got leaked out by a pinhole to being originally just a cosmic cube that didn't have a matrix. Later, he got retconned a second time into just a mutant and human with his powers resulting from exposure to Terrigen mists. Then a third time, he was retconned again as a child unit of the Beyonders, a race of extra-dimensional entities. It was stupid. He went from being, in my opinion, it's one of the things that annoyed me the most. He was an amazing character, very well written, extremely well written Secret Wars 2, which affected the entire Marvel timeline. From start to finish, he affected the entire Marvel world on such a deep, intimate level, and all the characters went through so much character development because of him. It was a shame to lose all that. He was a great character, and seeing that they shut down so much of the storyline by doing the retcons just messed up a lot of the great character development that they went throughout the Marvel Universe. So with all that being said, let me cover a few specific examples. So for example, let's look at Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler encountered the Beyonder, this super powerful cosmic entity that was all powerful, that made him question his faith and existence in God, in the divine, his religion. And then when they retconned, he went through all this amazing character development, and then when they retconned Beyonder, they basically swept all of Nightcrawler's character development under the rug and made it seem like he never had a crisis of faith. That's one thing. Another big one was the New Mutants. The New Mutants were completely wiped out of existence. Completely. Their deaths and their resurrections. Because of that happened, because of those events, I'm not going to go into too much detail in case you want to read it, but because of those events, the New Mutants went through a massive psychological breakdown, going from not existing at all to existing again, and it took a long time, almost a decade. Their timelines were affected by almost a decade because of what happened. So for that whole following decade, the New Mutants experienced character developments, existential crises, deep development, both interdynamically and internally, as a result of what the Beyonder did. And then basically later narratives, when they did all the retcons, it just basically minimized all the psychological impact of all the shit they went through. Spider-Man, he got his original black symbiote suit, which eventually became Venom. So not only did he get his first black symbiote suit, but he was also the origin of Venom. So in reality, the Beyonder was central to the origin of Venom himself, which led to a bunch of story arcs. And then when they went back and retconned everything, they basically redid the origin story, and the connection to the Beyonder was downplayed greatly in future retellings, making it almost non-existent. Molecule Man's another one. The Beyonder interacted with the Molecule Man on an extremely deep level. They both shared a unique power that were both super powerful, and then later they retconned them both to where they were both byproducts of the same cosmic event, which is what intertwined their abilities. I never was happy with what happened with the retcons, and it's something I'll always be against, but obviously it is what it is. Dr. Doom, at one point, took over the Beyonder's powers, becoming almost omnipotent, allowing him to alter reality as well. And then when he lost that power, it affected him for a while because he had achieved such a high level of cosmic power, and he had a huge impact on him as a person and as a character. But again, when they retconned it, they downplayed all of that and minimized it, which again made it to where it was almost non-existent. So regardless what anyone says, I'm never going to be happy with the retcon. I wish they would have kept the original narrative. I wish they would have kept all of Secret Wars 2 as key events in the storyline. And, it's the past. We're talking about older comics now, decades ago. But it's still something that I always would have loved to explore in the Marvel Universe. And I was very, very happy to be able to explore those narratives. Because if you actually sat down and read a lot of the comics from the 1960s up until Secret Wars 2 and read all the offshoots and saw how everything came together, a lot of people would agree with me. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of people would agree that he played a huge role in the storylines and the character development, and it was extremely well written. Because Secret Wars was its own separate series. It had like 7 or 8 something issues, maybe more than that. Plus, the crossovers were so dynamic. There's just so much that happened that it was just a shame to see it all come to an end. And again, it might be a hot take for some people. I don't know. But for me, it was a huge thing that I love seeing all the character development. I wish they would have kept it in the original narrative. So, with that being said, moving on to the next topic, which is going to be Miss Marvel. So the next main topic I want to talk about is Carol Danvers, which is Miss Marvel. I'm not talking about some of the other Miss Marvels. I'm specifically talking about Carol Danvers. She originated in the 1970s, where she got her power through Kree technology. She originally became Miss Marvel. She ended up doing her own solo run. She joined the Avengers for a while. A whole bunch of stuff happened. And then here's the part that was controversial. Here's the part that a lot of people were pissed off about. At one point, Carol was basically, I gotta be careful because I don't know what the rules are for podcasts, especially on YouTube, but long story short, she got kidnapped by Marcus, mentally brainwashed, made pregnant against her will, had a baby, which ended up being basically a replica of Marcus himself, who then aged drastically. And the issue was the Avengers at the time basically gave her up. They didn't fight for her. They didn't try to save her. They just basically gave her to Marcus like she was property. And it was a really controversial storyline. It was the Avengers 200 where she was kidnapped. Here's like a summary of it. Miss Marvel is kidnapped by Marcus, the son of Immortus, and taken into an alternate dimension. There she is manipulated into a relationship resulting in a rapid pregnancy and birth of another version of Marcus. The storyline faced criticism. So, yeah, it's a big thing. It went through a lot of controversy at the time, and then they did some slight retcons. So in Avengers number 11, Chris Claremont, he ended up, they didn't retcon it, but they basically revisited the subject. So Carol ended up confronting the Avengers and told them how much like she can't trust them and all this other stuff. So like there was a bunch of stuff, but that eventually led to her getting attacked by Rogue and getting all of her powers and memories stolen. And then later on she became binary, and then later on in the series a bunch of other stuff happened with her. She eventually became Miss Marvel again, and Warbird and a couple of others. So I'm not going to get into all that, but long story short, I'm a big Miss Marvel fan, and it's a shame all the stuff that happened with Marcus, although sometimes in real life bad things happen. But she got the short end of the stick. She had been treated like shit by the writers most of her career in the comics. She's always been through a lot of shit, and it's unfortunate, but she was a good character. Even today, she's always been a good character, even though she was a little bit like overzealous about the whole feminism thing back then. They had a lot of people complaining that she was so, like, it almost seemed like that was the whole point of the character, but they fixed a lot of those issues. Alright, with that said, moving on, the only other comic related topic I want to talk about right now, well, this will probably be the final topic for comics before I move on to a different subject, at least for this podcast. I'm going to have a lot of things to talk about related to comics in the future, but this I think will be the last thing comic related on this specific episode. So the next thing is about the Guardians of the Galaxy. So for Guardians of the Galaxy, I want to visit the differences between the different mediums. So there was the comics, there was the MCU, which is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which are the movies, and then there's a video game. Each one of them is set in a different universe. The comics are obviously, for the most part, are 616. The 3 movies and the offshoot movies that happened around that were the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then the video game is like a different, separate universe that's kind of a hybrid between the other two, which I found very interesting, the dynamics. So let's look at a few things. For example, Peter Quill's mother, how did she die? In the comic, originally, she was killed by an unidentified aliens when he was a child. Basically, they ended up, it was the Badoons, the race of an alien race called the Badoons, that ended up killing her. He didn't find out later what they actually were named, but it was the Badoons that shot her. In the movies, she died from brain cancer when he was a child, before he got kidnapped by I think it was the Ravagers. It's been a minute. So, and he struggled a lot throughout the movies with her death and feeling guilty about her death. And then the video games, she was shot. He was a little bit older as a kid, and the farm got raided by Chitauri, another alien race. So she got shot by the Chitauri, and he always felt responsible for that. So with that being said, so in the MCU it was cancer, and in both of the other mediums she was both shot. So it was kind of a mix between the two, because the video game made it to where she was shot. It was just a different race called the Chitauri, and he was a little bit older. Also, he felt the guilt there that he didn't feel as much, and he felt some in the movies, but most of the guilt was from not feeling like he could save her. So it was kind of a combination between the 3. And then a lot of the characters are different between the 3 different dynamics. So if you look at any of the mediums and look at one of the characters, you'll be able to kind of see a different personality. And what I've noticed in the pattern is you've got comics have one extreme, the movies have another extreme to an extent, and then the video game kind of bridges the gap between them, bringing the best of both worlds. So like on comics, Peter is a human Spartax hybrid. His father was Jason of Spartax. He became Star-Lord after joining NASA. And so looking at the personalities between the 3, Peter, for example, in the comics, he's more serious, tactile, and authoritative. He was a good leader, but carried a lot of emotional burdens of responsibility. In the movies, he's charismatic, humorous, cocky, prone to impulsive decisions, and then he uses humor and pop culture references a lot as a defense mechanism. His personality really comes out too because of Chris Pratt playing him. And in the video games, he's witty, charismatic, and optimistic, but also extremely emotionally vulnerable, more so than both of the other mediums. He actively deals with his trauma regarding his mother and self-doubt about leadership. So I find that video games was a really great writing creative team to blend together the two. Gamora, in the comics, ruthless, disciplined warrior with occasional vulnerability often driven by revenge against Thanos. MCU, stoic and reserved, driven by a strong moral compass and redemption, gradually opens up emotionally to Peter. Video games, pragmatic, strategic, conflicted over past violence, deeply cares about redemption and trust, often mediating between teammates. Also in the game, she was much more emotionally vulnerable, and there wasn't a relationship between her and Peter like there was in the movie. Drax was a big one that comes to mind. I'm gonna stop with Drax because they're all about the same, but like not the same, but they all have the same dynamic. Drax was, in the comics, he was intense, intelligent, and a strategic warrior that was deeply haunted by his past. In MCU, the movies, he was literally minded, comedic relief, yet fearlessly loyal and driven by revenge over his family. A lot of people considered him to be borderline slow in the movie, though, like a big toddler. Like, it's hard to explain. You'd have to watch the movies. But in the video games, they took the best of both worlds. They made him a proud warrior, humorous and literal in his literal interpretation, yet extremely deeply intelligent philosophically about life, death, honor, friendship. You can see him even reading a book called Sarcasm for Dummies. In the comic, he's extremely intelligent, extremely well thought out, even though he does still have the humor aspect as well. So it's all pretty good. I like the difference between them, especially with Groot. But yeah, that's the main thing I wanted to talk about. Like, the comics are amazing, the movies are amazing, and the video game just took the best of both worlds and just made it more than amazing. It was an extremely good experience, and I think I'll close it out there when it comes to comics. I have a lot of other things about comics I want to talk about, and I'm sure in other random videos and future podcasts I will at times have other topics, but these are different things that I've talked about in other videos that I've not been able to fully cover, and now that I'm doing the whole podcast thing, I feel like I have a lot more time at once to sit down and talk about these things. So yeah, those are the topics that I wanted to cover. With that being said, now I think I'm going to move into a couple of video game related topics that I want to talk about. Let's talk a little bit about video games and some of the recent news. I'm only going to cover the ones that I've recently been interested in, even though I'm very big on video games in general, so I'm very big on all the news. Again, there's so much happening in the gaming industry, I'm just going to focus on a few specific things that I wanted to cover. First, let's look at GTA 6. I'm a big fan of GTA. I played all of them. 1 and 2 from the top-down view all the way up through 5. I loved 4. I loved 5. I loved Vice City, San Andreas. I played them all. And GTA 6, there's finally been some news about it. The internet's been blowing up with like jokes about, oh, we're going to get this before GTA 6 comes out. Whatever it is. So, release date. There's not an official announcement yet on an exact date, but Rockstar did officially announce that GTH was scheduled for release in fall of 2025. So this year, we should be getting GTA 6. The prices are rumored to be around $100 at release. A significant increase from before. That's what the community's thinking, probably around $100. They also reported that they're going to be integrating user-generated content for Rockstar, which is something new when it comes to the GTA series. So that's going to be huge because they're finally being open for modding and everything else. Side note, I really wish they would do a Bully too. I love the original Bully game. So there's a lot going on with GTA 6. If you go online, you can find trailers and stuff for it. It's already really hitting the market. There's a lot of good shit happening with Rockstar lately. The next game I want to talk about is Gears of War E-Day. Because as of right now, there's no official information regarding announcements, but I know that E-Day is being worked on. So Gears of War E-Day is an upcoming third person, obviously, with it being Gears of War. It's going to be the 6th mainline installment, and it's going to be a prequel set 14 years before the events of the original game. It's scheduled to be released on Xbox. It basically is going to follow Marcus, Phoenix, and Dom before the war, and we're going to get to see a lot of character development. It's really going to be nice seeing Dom again, and fans will know why, obviously. It's going to be really good seeing him again and being able to play as him, even if it is in the past. We do not have a release date on that, but it definitely is coming. And then there's also rumors in the Gears of War community about a Gears of War collection. which would be a compilation of previous titles in the series, potentially remastered. There's been rumors that they may not be keeping the multiplayer modes, they might be excluding those. There's been no official word, there's been no official confirmation. It's just kind of like an ongoing discussion, and there are rumors about it, so I guess we'll see what happens with that over time as things stir. That's another interesting topic to look at. And then Assassin's Creed Shadows. That is coming out very soon. It's going to be releasing on the 20th. I'm in the process. I've beaten every single Assassin's Creed game from beginning to end. I am currently on Mirage, which is the last one that I have to beat, and I'm about a quarter of the way through it. I want to finish it before the 20th so I can start on Shadows when it comes out. It's going to be set in the 16th century Japan, around the Nobunaga era. It's going to be about 30 to 40 hours long, and about 80 hours if you're a completionist, maybe more. They've added a lot of the mechanics back from the original Assassin's Creed, so that's going to be really good. So yeah, we're gonna see what they do with it, but it's one that I'm really looking forward to, and I will be playing that and streaming it on YouTube as soon as it comes out. That's another great one. And then finally, Mass Effect. So BioWare has officially confirmed development of Mass Effect 5, which they started in 2020, at least the initial announcement. Currently, it's still in the production stage. I don't think we have any dates for release. They're thinking somewhere around 2029, which sucks because that's like 4 years down the road, but hopefully it's worth the wait. They're restructuring BioWare as a company lately because they've had a lot of issues within BioWare. They laid off a couple of dozen people to kind of streamline development. So I'm curious to see what happens. It is a long ways off, but hopefully they don't cancel it, and guess we'll see, because Mass Effect is one of my favorite series. It's one of the best series and one of my favorites, so hopefully they do release it. So there's a lot more video game topics that I plan on talking about in the future, not just release information, but but video games in general. I'm just trying. This is my first podcast, so I don't want to go too overboard. I want to kind of probably going to shoot for about an hour, because there's a few more topics I want to cover, and then I'll call it on it. And then next episode will probably be closer to 2 hours when I have time to like sit down and figure out what all content I want to be posting about. So with that being said, let's look at AI. The AI industry has been booming like crazy the last couple of years. Since ChatGPT came out, they've had multiple different iterations, multiple different competitors, and I'm really happy with where the industry is. GPT 4.5 came out not even a few weeks ago, and compared to Grok 3 coming out, and the new Claude AI and Gemini's latest version. So the industry's booming. And then that whole fiasco that happened with DeepSeek was another interesting thing to watch unfold, and this whole like nationwide initiative they're doing as well. There's a lot of stuff going on in the industry, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out and how it unfolds, because there's some great stuff happening. So to compare, I really like where all of them are at. There's at the very, very top, ChatGPT 4.5, and ChatGPT in general is my favorite. I love the way it's built. I love the personality behind it. I love the way it talks, the features that it has. And then beyond that, I would say Gemini is a close second. And I'm going to get into those reasons why in a minute. And then Grok 3 came out, which is absolutely amazing. So my current order would be ChatGPT 4.5, Grok 3, and then Gemini below that. So the reasons why. Gemini originally was a lot less restrictive. OpenAI is very, very obsessively strict about their content, and they give you content violation warnings for everything. And it's really annoying, because if you're I'm a writer, so sometimes if I go in and ask it questions about anything not in line with like common sense, it'll try to tell me it's a content violation and I can't talk about it. Stuff like, anything at all illegal, or anything about like murder, anything that a writer would want to research about, it just won't, including any kind of role playing or anything like that. So it's really restrictive. Gemini, on the other hand, has always been very easy to work with. If I message Gemini and I say, hey, I'm a writer and I want to help researching X, Y, and Z, it'll help give me a lot more information than ChatGPT ever would. So that's why it was my second. And then over time, now ChatGPT a while back rechanged their dynamics, their rules to where they allow you to chat with it about things. And basically, the only thing you can't talk about is anything related to children in a not healthy way, obviously. Again, I don't want to get banned off of here, so I got to be careful how I word things. But anything else, they don't really have the content warning anymore. You can talk about violence, drugs, and all that stuff without much of a problem. Because if you're talking about those things with the AI, ChatGPT, now it won't give you that content warning, and most of the time it'll answer your questions within reason. It still has some obvious limitations, but it works much, much better than it did before. So since that happened, I haven't really had a need to go back to Gemini because I've just been using ChatGPT. Even though I still play around with Gemini to kind of keep up to date with what its features are like, and it works really well. It's really changed a lot of the terms for what I used it for when they fixed that. So yeah, kind of going into more detail. My current iteration, GPT 4.5, ChatGPT in general is my main one because without those restrictions, I can talk to it about almost anything without getting hit with content warnings. So as a writer, I'm really not limited on anything anymore. So that's my main one. Secondly, Grok 3 would be a very close second. Grok 1 and 2 was nice, but wasn't really up to par. Grok 3, I actually watched the release premiere on it where they had the live stream on it, and it worked really well. They've got a really good handle on the release that they're trying to do. It's extremely intelligent. It's on par with GPT 4, I would say. Maybe close to 4.5. I haven't checked. I don't pay attention to the benchmarks and stuff, even though I probably could. I mostly focus on looking at what the general consensus is for myself when I'm using it. Sorry, I got distracted for a minute during some of the videos. I was doing something at the same time. But with that being said, Grok 3 works really, really well. It's very well built. It's smart. It's intelligent. Easy to work with. And then there is the others, Gemini, Claude, even DeepSeek. They're all very good. They're smart. They're intelligent. I just don't have a need for them as often because I've got the ones that I use the most. And I just kind of dabble in those to kind of keep up with the industry. The only issue I have with GPT right now, ChatGPT, is that Gemini released the ability for Gemini to know the context of all the past conversations. So it's like an expanded memory, which means every chat you've ever had, you've got Gemini, which has its core knowledge base that it was trained on as one layer, and then the second layer is your entire chat history, which it has access to, and then third, the internet if it needs to check the internet. And they did that a while back, and that was probably one of the main things that I've been waiting for in ChatGPT. So that's another reason why I really like Gemini in that area, because they've done that before anyone else, and they still have it like that. ChatGPT, on the other hand, they don't. They released the ability to the public about a week ago, where it popped up a notification on my account saying they had added a new option for expanded memory. And there's a difference because you've already got with ChatGPT, you've already got the existing memories where you can add, edit, and delete memory fragments, like a piece of information to serve as a memory, which gives it, allows it to retain that between chats, but they don't have access to other chats. So when they added this expanded memory, it allowed ChatGPT to know all the contents of all your other chats. And that only lasted for like a day, and then they took it away because people were having issues with memory. So I'm hoping they re-release that, because that's one of my favorite features. Having the ability to create a new chat in ChatGPT and have it automatically know all of the content of your previous chats in memory is amazing. That's going to be like one of my favorite features, and I'm still looking forward to that coming back. Hopefully they release that sooner rather than later, because they did release it at one point, but it didn't last because it was it was competitive once Gemini did it, and now they're trying to catch up. So hopefully they do that soon. because what I wanted to do is I wanted to create several chats going into a lot of different details and keeping them saved so that ChatGPT would have that wisdom. So that's pretty much it for the AI industry. There's a lot going on. It's blowing up. They've got this global initiative happening. All this stuff that blew up with DeepSeek really took the market by storm, and that helped to boost productivity in all the other markets. And now you've got OpenAI. Well, let me go by the official name. You have ChatGPT, you have Gemini, Claude AI, Grok, and DeepSeek. And there's others. There's some others that are not as mainstream and a couple of other big ones, but those are like the big names, the bigger names. You've got all of those now releasing new models every month or every 2 months, updates rolling out quick. So now you've got all these really cool things happening. And because there's so much competition, it's forcing ChatGPT to start pushing out on features. So now they rolled out the memory stuff, which they took away, but I think they'll re-roll that out. They rolled out a bunch of stuff for Christmas, the projects and everything else, and now they're rolled out 4.5, and they're supposed to be rolling out 5 in a matter of weeks. From what I'm understanding, within the next few weeks or a few months at the most, it's going to be rolling out GPT-5, which I know a lot about that from what I've heard and researched, but we'll get into that later. That's another conversation. But for this specific conversation, GPT 4.5 has a better personality than any of the other AIs that it's had before then. Also, taking into account that GPT 4.5 understands human reasoning a little bit better and responds a little bit more like a human. And it's a big leap. A lot of people have loved that model. There's a really big war going on right now between like Elon Musk and Grok and ChatGPT and OpenAI. So there's like this really big war going on between them. So I'm really happy to see the competition between the two, because that competition is what's really driving the industry forward. That competition is driving the industry much deeper than it would have gone, because when OpenAI was there originally, they were launching really good models, and they took the market by storm, but they were going slow on releases for a while and taking their time. And then all of a sudden the competition started coming in, and they started really speeding up development on a lot of things. And then we had the AI image generation improving, and then Sora for the video production. And I run with a Plus account, the Pro account, I mean, because I like being able to go and download Sora videos, because I don't do AI generated videos for much except for YouTube shorts, which is what I use it for. Some of them, not all of them, but some of my YouTube shorts, a lot of them are AI generated experiments. So that's a fun thing to play around with. That's mostly it in the AI industry. It's something that I've always been very interested in, and it's something that I love keeping track of. And right now, if you haven't been involved in it, feel free to check out ChatGPT and Grok 3 especially. And then if you want some others to play around with, you've always got Claude AI, CLAUDE AI, and then Gemini as well. So those are all good ones to play around with. To wrap things up, I want to talk a few minutes about my writing. I might have a couple of straggling thoughts after that, but the next main topic is going to be my writing. So I am a writer and an author. I have my writing published on Amazon KDP, as well as on my website. I have it linked back to Amazon. I've been writing for a long time. It's one of my passions. I don't care about making money off of it, although I would eventually like to switch careers to be writing full time. A little bit about what I'm currently working on. I just orchestrated the plan for 2 different series. One of them is called, some of this I said at the beginning of the podcast, but I'm kind of recapping. One of them is Wisdom That Fits, and one of them is Personal Wisdom. I don't believe in using AI for writing because I'm a writer. Any creative writing I do is 100% me. But when it's doing research or compiling information that is strictly factual information, I'll sometimes use AI for that. So the first series in the nonfiction category is Wisdom That Fits, which a lot of that is assisted with AI because it's wisdom that I don't have. It's wisdom that I'm pulling from the internet. It's factual information only, not creative writing. It's just like information compiled and presented in WTF. And I got 2 different versions. I've got one called Beginner's Guide and the other one called Deep Dive. Beginner's Guide is basically a generic beginner-friendly overview of a topic, while Deep Dive is when it goes into a lot deeper dive into a specific topic. And I'm going to be doing it on random things. I got 3 of them already up on Amazon, and I may release more later. And then my Wisdom That Fits is different because it's not factual information. It's information that I know personally, that it's topics that I'm very familiar with. So like the one that I've written for personal wisdom so far that hasn't been published is a dream book. I have a very deep understanding of dreams. I'm very good at dream reading. It's been something that's a huge hobby of mine. Most of my friends tell me that my dream reading is so on point, it's almost crazy. But I've been reading dreams my whole life, so I know a lot about dreams, dream recall, dream reading / interpretation, and things like that. Lucid dreaming, different topics of dream reality. So anything dream related is a really big topic for me. I repeat myself because I keep pausing and then coming back to finish. But no, dream recall, dream reading, dream interpretation, different topics of dreaming. In one of the podcasts that I do, I'm going to do a really deep dive into what I call the dream framework theory. In fact, I might do that now. It's a good topic that I want to cover anyway because I'm writing a book on it. So yeah, I think now's a good time. But before I get into that, let me talk about the other projects that I've got going on. I'm currently working on a serial novel. Well, all that's going to be a topic for another day. Those are all pretty deep topics. So the stuff I'm working on now, which is a serial novel, and some of the other parts I'll go into later. Those will be a topic for a different podcast, though. But for now, I'm going to talk about... I'm going to save that for the next podcast because, again, I'm going to need... This one's my first one, and I don't want to, make it too long. There's a lot that I want to talk about, though. So during the next podcast, I'll probably have conversations about more in depth with my writing, as well as a couple of other topics I want to talk about. I think that's it for now. Let's cover these we've covered these main topics. I'm going to go ahead and publish this podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. And then in the next one, it's probably going to be a little bit closer to 2 hours because I'm going to be talking about some more advanced subjects, including my writing and some stuff related to that. So I think that's about it. Appreciate you for listening, and I will try to be doing about 1 podcast per week, maybe more. I don't know how many episodes I'm going to do right now. I'm just kind of playing it by ear, but we'll do it one step at a time, and we'll see what happens. Thank you for listening.